Top HFY stories, the one that you feed. In the endless void between stars, the Erebus drifted silently, its hull scarred from battles long past. The ship's captain, an aging man named Elias Ward, leaned back in his chair, staring at the holographic display of their destination. A faint blue dot shimmered in the blackness, a planet the crew simply called Sanctuary. The journey to Sanctuary was humanity's last hope. Decades of war with the alien core had pushed humanity to the brink, their once great fleets now reduced to scraps, but hope was a fragile ember, and Elias carried the burden of keeping it alive. The bridge was quiet except for the hum of machinery and the occasional whisper of his crew. Among them was Lieutenant Kira Voss, young but hardened by loss and drive, Emmett Gray, a scientist whose mind was sharper than any blade. They were survivors, like everyone else aboard the Erebus, bound together by the faint promise of a new beginning. "What's the status on the core?" Elias asked, breaking the silence. Kira glanced up from her console, barely holding. "We've got enough power for one jump, maybe two if we're lucky." Elias nodded grimly. "One will have to do." As they prepared for the final jump, Emmett approached Elias with a small data pad. His face was pale, his expression a mix of fear and determination. "I've finished the analysis," Emmett said. "The artifact. It's alive, in a sense." Elias frowned. The artifact had been their prize, a relic stolen from the core's warships during a daring raid. It was a crystalline structure that pulsed with an otherworldly light, a power source unlike anything humanity had ever seen, but it came with a price. "It feeds on intent," Emmett continued, "positive or negative. The stronger the emotions we direct toward it, the more powerful it becomes." "And if we feed it the wrong kind of intent?" Elias asked. "It could destroy us." The captain's jaw tightened. He had suspected as much. The artifact was both salvation and damnation, its power a double-edged sword. Humanity's survival hinged on their ability to wield it wisely. "We have no choice," Elias said. "We'll use it to reach Sanctuary. Once we're there, we'll decide what to do with it." The crew gathered in the engine room, where the artifact rested in a reinforced chamber. Its glow bathed the walls in shifting shades of blue and violet, mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. Elias stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "We are the last of humanity," he said. "This artifact is our chance to rebuild, to start over, but it will only work if we give it the right energy, the right intent. Think of the people we've lost, the lives we're trying to protect. Focus on hope, on love, on the future we want to create." The crew closed their eyes, their collective thoughts pouring into the artifact. It began to hum, its light intensifying until it was blinding. The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life, propelled by the raw power of human emotion. In an instant, the Erebus leapt through the void, leaving the darkness behind. When the ship re-emerged, the crew gasped at the sight before them, a lush, vibrant world bathed in golden sunlight, Sanctuary. But as the crew cheered, Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The artifact still pulsed, its glow darker now, almost hungry. He knew their battle wasn't over. The artifact's power was tied to humanity's emotions, and it would always crave more. Elias turned to Kira and Emmett. "We've reached Sanctuary, but the real challenge begins now. We must choose carefully what we feed. Hope can save us, but fear could doom us all." Part 2, The Hunger Within. The crew of the Erebus stood in awe as the planet Sanctuary filled their viewports, its sprawling forests and shimmering oceans promising the fresh start they had sacrificed so much to reach. Yet Elias Ward couldn't shake the unease gnawing at the back of his mind. The artifact had brought them here, but at what cost? "Begin landing procedures," Elias ordered, his voice steady despite the weight in his chest. Kira Voss, manning the controls, nodded and guided the ship into the planet's atmosphere. Turbulence rattled the Erebus as they descended, the artifact pulsing faintly in sync with the vibrations. Elias felt its presence like a shadow at the edge of his thoughts, whispering, waiting. The landing was rough but successful. As the crew disembarked, they were greeted by a paradise untouched by war. Towering trees swayed in the warm breeze, and crystalline rivers cut through the emerald landscape. It was everything they had dreamed of, yet Elias couldn't bring himself to trust it. Drive. Emmett Gray carried the artifact in a containment unit, its glow subdued but persistent. "This world is teeming with life," he said, scanning the environment with his instruments. "It's perfect for rebuilding. We could grow crops, establish cities. If we survive long enough." Elias interrupted. He gestured toward the artifact. "That thing is still feeding off us, Emmett. We don't know what it's capable of." Emmett frowned but didn't argue. Instead, he followed Elias and the others as they set up a temporary base near the river. The crew worked quickly, driven by a mix of hope and desperation. For the first time in years, they had solid ground beneath their feet, fresh air in their lungs. But the artifact's presence loomed over them like a storm cloud. The first night. That night, as the crew gathered around a fire, the artifact sat in the center of their circle, its light casting strange, flickering shadows. They spoke of their dreams for the future, a world free from war, a home where humanity could thrive. For a while, the warmth of their words seemed to pacify the artifact, its glow soft and steady. Then the whispers began. At first, Elias thought he was imagining things, a faint murmur, just beyond the edge of hearing. He glanced at the others, but no one seemed to notice. The whispers grew louder, distinct words forming in his mind. "Feed me." Elias clenched his fists, his heart pounding. The artifact was speaking to him, its voice cold and insistent. He tried to ignore it, focusing on the laughter of his crew, but the whispers persisted, weaving doubt and fear into his thoughts. "They will betray you, they only want to take from you." Elias shook his head, forcing himself to look at Kira, who was smiling as she shared a story from her childhood, but even her laughter felt distant, unreal. The artifact's voice filled his mind. "You are alone, Elias. They will destroy everything you've fought for. Feed me, and I will protect you." The division. The next morning, tensions began to rise. Arguments broke out over small issues, rationing supplies, assigning tasks. Kira noticed it first. "This isn't normal," she said, pulling Elias aside. "Everyone was fine yesterday, now they're at each other's throats." Elias nodded grimly. "The artifact is feeding on us, it's turning our fears and insecurities into fuel. We need to get rid of it," Kira said. "Bury it, destroy it, whatever it takes." Emmett overheard and approached, shaking his head. "You can't destroy it. If we lose the artifact, we lose everything. It's the only reason we made it this far. It's also the reason we might not survive." Kira shot back. "Look at what it's doing to us." Elias stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "Enough, we'll figure this out, but we have to work together." As the days passed, the divide among the crew deepened. Some sided with Emmett, believing the artifact was humanity's salvation. Others followed Kira, convinced it was a ticking time bomb. Elias found himself caught in the middle, his own resolve wavering as the artifact's whispers grew louder. The choice. One night, as the crew slept, Elias stood alone by the artifact. Its glow pulsed in time with his heartbeat, its whispers wrapping around his mind like tendrils. "You cannot save them all," it said, "but you can save yourself. Feed me, and I will give you the strength to survive." Elias stared at the artifact, his reflection warped in its crystalline surface. He thought of the sacrifices they had made, the lives lost along the way. He thought of the crew, fractured and fragile, teetering on the edge of despair. "I won't let you destroy us," he whispered, his voice shaking. The artifact's glow intensified, its whispers turning into a deafening roar. Elias reached for his sidearm, raising it toward the containment unit. His hands trembled as he prepared to pull the trigger. Then Kira's voice broke through the chaos. "Elias." He turned to see her standing behind him, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "You're stronger than this," she said. "We're stronger than this. Don't let it win." Elias hesitated, the weight of the artifact's influence pressing down on him, but as he looked into Kira's eyes, he felt a spark of clarity. He lowered the weapon and stepped back. "We need to destroy it," he said, "together." To be continued. Part 3, The Reckoning. The Erebus's camp was quiet, the crew restless in their makeshift shelters as Elias, Kira, and Emmett gathered by the artifact. It pulsed ominously, its crystalline structure casting distorted shadows on their faces. The divide among the crew had reached its breaking point. Half wanted to keep the artifact, half wanted it gone. The artifact seemed to revel in their disarray, its light growing stronger with every argument, every fraying bond. "It's feeding on us faster," Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like it knows we're about to do something." "Of course it knows," Emmett replied, his tone defensive. "It's sentient in its own way. If you destroy it, you'll doom us all. We won't survive without it." Elias stepped between them, holding up a hand to silence the brewing fight. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're not surviving with it either. Look around, Emmett, we're falling apart." Emmett opened his mouth to argue, but a loud snap from the forest stopped him cold. The three of them turned toward the darkness beyond the camp's perimeter, weapons drawn. "What was that?" Kira hissed. "Probably local wildlife," Elias muttered, though his grip on his rifle tightened. The shadows stirred, and a figure emerged. At first, it seemed human, until its elongated limbs and the faint bioluminescent glow along its skin came into view. It wasn't one of them. Elias raised his weapon. "Don't move." The creature stopped, tilting its head as if studying them. Then it spoke, its voice a low, resonant hum. "You carry the hunger." "The hunger?" Kira echoed, her weapon still trained on the being. The creature stepped closer, unarmed but cautious. "It was not meant for you, the artifact. It is of us, a tool of creation, corrupted by our kind." Elias lowered his rifle slightly, his curiosity outweighing his fear. "Corrupted? What do you mean?" "The hunger feeds on chaos," the creature explained. "It amplifies your darkest impulses, twists them into power. When our people used it, we tempered it with unity, with harmony, but you—" It looked at the three of them, almost pitying. "You are fractured." Elias exchanged a glance with Kira and Emmett. The creature's words confirmed their fears. The artifact was a weapon that thrived on division. "Can it be stopped?" Elias asked, his voice firm. The creature hesitated. "It can be silenced, but not without cost." "Tell us," Kira pressed. The creature gestured toward the artifact. "The hunger must be deprived of fuel. You must face it together, united, unwavering. Only then will its light fade." The trial. Elias gathered the crew in the clearing, explaining the creature's instructions. The artifact pulsed faintly, as if mocking their resolve. "You're asking us to trust that thing?" one of the crew, a young engineer named Milo, asked, pointing at the creature. "How do we know this isn't a trap?" Elias stepped forward. "We don't," he admitted, "but what other choice do we have? This artifact is killing us. If we don't stop it now, we'll tear ourselves apart." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, fear and doubt spreading like wildfire. Elias could feel the artifact feeding on their unease. "Enough," Kira shouted, silencing the group. "We didn't survive this long to let some glowing rock destroy us. Trust each other, or we're already dead." Slowly, reluctantly, the crew formed a circle around the artifact. They clasped hands, their faces tense but determined. The creature stood at the edge of the circle, watching silently. "Focus on what brought us here," Elias said. "Hope, unity. Think of the people we've lost, the future we're fighting for. Don't let the artifact twist it." The crew closed their eyes, their collective thoughts turning toward the memories of loved ones, the dream of rebuilding a better world. The artifact's light flared, bright and violent, as if resisting their efforts. The whispers returned, louder than ever. "They will fail you, they will betray you, feed me." Elias gritted his teeth, focusing on the faces of his family. "Long gone but never forgotten." "Not this time," he muttered. The artifact's glow began to waver, its light flickering like a dying flame. The whispers turned to shrieks, a cacophony of anger and desperation. The ground trembled, and for a moment, Elias thought the artifact would explode. Then, silence. The artifact's glow dimmed, then faded entirely. The crystalline structure collapsed into ash, scattering in the wind. The crew let out a collective breath. The weight of the artifact's presence finally lifted. The new dawn. The next morning, the camp was quiet but peaceful. For the first time in weeks, the crew felt free. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as they began rebuilding their camp. Elias approached it, his expression one of cautious gratitude. "Thank you, we couldn't have done this without you." The creature inclined its head. "Your kind is stronger than you know, but remember, the hunger still exists. Should you falter, it may find you again. Elias nodded, the creature's warning etched into his mind. As it disappeared into the forest, he turned to Kira and Emmett. "We've got a second chance," he said, "let's not waste it." The three of them stood together, watching as their crew worked to build a future free from fear. For the first time in years, hope felt like more than just a dream. Part 4, The Echoes of Hunger. Weeks passed on Sanctuary, and life began to take shape. The camp expanded into a small settlement, with shelters, gardens, and a sense of purpose. For the first time in years, laughter and hope filled the air. The artifact's shadow seemed to have lifted, but Elias couldn't shake the creature's warning: the hunger still exists. Kira and Emmett had thrown themselves into their respective roles. Kira oversaw security, ensuring the settlement stayed safe from the planet's wildlife, while Emmett dove into research, cataloging the ecosystem and ensuring the environment could sustain them long-term. Elias, however, found himself restless. The signs. One evening, as the twin moons of Sanctuary cast pale light over the settlement, Elias stood at the edge of the forest. He stared into the shadows, his hand resting on the sidearm at his hip. Something had been gnawing at him lately, a faint sense of unease, as though the artifact's influence hadn't entirely vanished. "Can't sleep again?" He turned to see Kira approaching, her rifle slung over her shoulder. She had a knack for finding him during these moments of doubt. "Just thinking," Elias said. "More like worrying," she replied, stepping beside him. "What's on your mind?" Elias hesitated before speaking. "It's too quiet." Kira raised an eyebrow. "You're complaining about peace? That's a first." "It's not that," Elias said, shaking his head. "It's the artifact. We destroyed it, but what if it left something behind? What if it planted seeds?" Kira frowned, her eyes scanning the tree line. "You think it's still here, the hunger?" "I don't know," Elias admitted, "but I can't ignore the feeling that something's wrong." The Forgotten Whisper. The next morning, Emmett called a meeting in the central clearing. His face was pale, and his usual calm demeanor had cracked. He held a small data pad, his hands trembling as he spoke. "I've been running scans on the settlement," he began, his voice tight, "and I found something strange." He projected an image into the air, a map of the area around the settlement, overlaid with energy signatures. Most of the map was calm, but at its center, near the site of the artifact's destruction, a faint but growing signal pulsed. "What is that?" Kira asked, her voice sharp. Emmett swallowed hard. "It's similar to the artifact's energy signature. I thought it was gone, but..." He trailed off, his fear unspoken. Elias stepped forward. "You're saying the artifact left something behind?" "It's possible," Emmett said. "It could be a fragment, a dormant piece that's reactivating, or it could be something worse." The expedition. Elias, Kira, and Emmett led a small team to the site. The forest seemed darker than usual, the air heavier. Every step felt like a march towards something waiting, watching. When they reached the clearing where the artifact had been destroyed, they found a shallow crater, its edges lined with blackened soil. At the center, a faintly glowing shard protruded from the ground. "Damn it," Kira muttered, raising her weapon. The shard pulsed weakly, its light dim but insistent. As the team approached, the air seemed to vibrate, a low hum pressing against their ears. "Careful," Emmett warned, kneeling to examine the shard. "It's not fully active, but it's definitely alive." Elias stared at the shard, his jaw tight. The whispers were back, faint but unmistakable. "Feed me." "It's trying to wake up," Elias said, his voice grim. "We need to destroy it before it grows stronger." Emmett hesitated. "We don't know what will happen if we destroy it. This could be connected to something deeper, something we don't understand." "We don't have time to understand it," Kira snapped. "If we let it grow, it'll tear us apart again." The argument hung in the air, the shard's light growing brighter as if feeding on their indecision. The battle within. As they deliberated, the ground beneath them began to shake. From the forest, dark tendrils of energy emerged, twisting and writhing like living shadows. The shard was defending itself. "Fall back," Elias shouted, but the tendrils moved fast, wrapping around the legs of 2 crew members and dragging them toward the shard. Kira opened fire, her bullets tearing through the tendrils, but more took their place. The shard pulsed wildly, its whispers growing louder, more desperate. "You cannot destroy me, I am you." Elias felt the words burrow into his mind, his worst fears laid bare. He saw the faces of his fallen crew, the weight of every decision he had made. But then he heard Kira's voice, cutting through the chaos. "Elias, don't listen to it." He shook off the whispers and raised his weapon. "We end this now."